Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Gopijana Vallabha Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Giribaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya, Astoro Shishya Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya, Astoro Shishya His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Ananti Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki. Nam Acharya Saridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kun Radhikun Giri Govardhan Ki. Vrindavan Navadip Dham Ki. Gangamai Jamunamai Ki. Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi Ki. Samaveta Bhakta Vrindi Ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're going to be discussing today from Hari Suri Prabhu's diary, the first volume, chapter 9, entitled Sridham Mayapur, from January 20th, 1976. So there's many things that, it's like not very detailed, some things have been covered already in the Lilamrita and you probably have read it. So we will be discussing, I will be discussing it, I'll paraphrase mainly because I won't read, I'll read some parts, but I will paraphrase as much as I can. But we can also have a discussion on Prabhupada as we're speaking. Is it okay? So anybody would like to raise anything, because we don't have the time to do that. Actually, that's the more important part. To discuss it. Like every Sundays we have a 2-hour discussion. Rupanuga is on that discussion. What do you think of that discussion? So it's an amazing discussion with some intelligent devotees, yeah. So we need to discuss even about Prabhupada. So Sridham Mayapur, January 20th, 1976. So Prabhupada, he's normally in his morning walks, he'll walk around the fields and he will examine, what's going on. And at this point he was looking at the drawings done by Surabi Prabhu, the architect. Because Prabhupada, was really concerned about the future development of a Gurukul system, because education seemed to be a very important part of Prabhupada's program or preaching program. And he really wanted the children to learn, because for the future generation they'll have to know this philosophy. So Gurukul was very, very important, and he was concerned about that development. But there's always challenges, and this was in Dallas. It was, it was talking about establishing in Dallas. But there are several problems regarding getting permission and the whole bureaucracy of getting things done in government services. Even previously the South African government, I must say, under the white rule, was the main focus was on education. Actually, that was a very important focus for them. In the budget, they would allocate a lot of money towards that. When I worked in an education department, and I know that they would, really go out of the way. So that was very interesting. And Prabhupada was doing the same thing. He was really concerned about educating. And he says, Srila Prabhupada wrote him a long letter, thoroughly outlining, he's referring to Jai Tirtha here, his desires for educating the society's children. He condemned modern education system, saying they meted the greatest violence upon the young by training them as sense gratifiers. Like the modern education, what it teaches is how to satisfy the senses. And, we have our teachers also. They're sense gratifiers. So they cannot really impart that knowledge to their students, because they don't follow it. It doesn't have that impact. Like, I had a very wonderful teacher when I was in high school, and he was an Afrikaans teacher, and an English and an Afrikaans teacher. But and he was like my form master, and he came from a Brahmin family also. And And I respected him, and I did respect him after that also, but I respected him whilst I was in school. But then later whilst I was working in the Department of Education, he was transferred from a school to the Department of Education. And I happened to be working with him, and one day I just got into a lift, and he had a cigarette in his mouth. So he saw me, he didn't know, because I never knew he smoked. So immediately he put it on the back. Then you could see the smoke coming out from the top there. So he was like totally taken aback. He knew that I was his student or his pupil. He taught, but he didn't really follow. So it's very difficult. And Prabhupada, noting all that modern education, that's what it does. It like trains sense gratifiers. And he said like the karmi system were producing people like cats and dogs who I feel very quite comfortable with sense gratification. Because the Gurukul system is based on Vairagya, Vidya, knowledge and renunciation. You get knowledge and you're renounced. When somebody is very renounced, they have a very great effect. Even Mayavadis. They may be Mayavadis, but because they control the senses, they have an effect on people. I remember, the Brahma Kumaris, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're very bright and potent people because they control the senses. So then as Harisuri writes, he said, he told them that he will never accept that one must undergo austerities to break the influence of the modes of material nature upon the living entity in order that he may experience the transcendental bliss on the platform of goodness. So, in a Gurukul systems, it's on the mode of goodness. So this is like a threat, and that's what Prabhupada said. It's like a threat. They cannot appreciate or wouldn't want people to follow such a system. They feel it's like a cruel punishment to the children. So anyway, this is backward and forward about it's talking about the Gurukul system. So, but the idea was to have the Gurukul system in Vrindavan. That was Prabhupada's kind of idea of a Gurukul. He said, they thought about the Krishna Balaram Mandir because they wanted to train children to follow a celibate life, brahmachari life, because brahmacharis are generally blissful, right? Nothing to worry about so much. They're blissful, and in India it'll be much cheaper than America. So he was. That's what his plan was. Anyway, like brahmachari, brahmacharis are very important in our movement. Actually they're best for deity worship. It's good to have brahmacharis because their senses are controlled, especially when you have deities or people who live in the temple. It's better for them to. I was thinking very much about this, that it's best people who live in the temple worship the deity or do deity worship, because they say, their senses are controlled, and then especially when you're worshipping Radha and Krishna, one has to be completely celibate. It may not be good. Like I was listening to once a lecture Giriraj Maharaj was giving. He said, if you break the principle, the person knows himself. He should just stay away from it. Then I was telling Swarup that, and Swarup said, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, even if they don't say anything to their authority, he must just not come to do it. It's very important because, the Radha and Krishna, this is the holy place, and we have to worship them with purity, in a pure way. Then in the evening, that evening on the 20th of January 1976, Prabhupada started talking about his life, how he began ISKCON, and how he spoke about his godbrother, Bon Maharaj, and there was an interesting point here that one librarian friend asked Prabhupada, why not write books? Paper is thrown away, but a book could be kept. So you see, it's amazing how, Prabhupada was listening to different people. To different people, things were coming out, from, and he would be attentive to what they were saying, because they were, probably prompted by Krishna to tell him. See, Krishna could speak through anybody. Krishna is in the heart. He's speaking. We're not hearing. So that was there. So in 1958, he wrote that book, The Easy Journey to Other Planets. Then in 1960, he started his Bhagavatam, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And he printed 1,100 copies, and he got some donation from some businessman. Then in 1965, he came to Mayapur to pay respects to his guru, and then returned to Calcutta, and then sailed for the United States. So you have to, if you look at it, when you look at how much of challenges Prabhupada would have went through, going all the way at that advanced age, translating this book, going to Mayapur. He had to go because to get the mercy of his spiritual master. Not that the spiritual master, he could have just gone, because he always felt that the spiritual master was with him. But still, he went, to get that mercy of his guru. And that's very key. It's important. Therefore, whilst the spiritual master is on the planet, we should try to spend as much time as possible to get Vapu and Vani, but we must get the physical association also. So whilst Prabhupada was talking about how he was suffering from chest pains, and he could have died and left his body, and he didn't even know it was a heart attack that he had. So like that. So before leaving India, the American embassy in Delhi had bought 19 copies each of the volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is quite interesting, and had a standing order for future volumes. So how interesting it is that Prabhupada sold this to the American embassy prior to even leaving to going to America. And then they were sent to America and put in different libraries in America. So when Prabhupada went to America, he went to the library and offered his books, and they told him, but we already have them. Then he went to a university in Philadelphia, and they also had it. So actually, the Srimad Bhagavatam went to the West before Srila Prabhupada. So Krishna, went to the West, and the Bhagavatam had gone. We had a lot of experiences. We placed a lot of Srila Prabhupada books in many libraries, even in Chatsworth. right around practically all the libraries we placed sets of books, and lots of them, even in Musgrave and I remember when we were placing one set of books in near the beachfront. There's a library there. So the guy is saying, no, this is not a good place, this, that. I said, no, you just leave it here. So one person came there and he took the 8th canto, he borrowed the 8th canto and read it. And when he read it, because our details with it, he called me. And he said he read this book and it just changed his life. And he gave it to his sister. And his sister's life changed. So these books are very, very powerful, placing in life. And Prabhupada, you see it personally do this. There's so much I can tell you about that. There was another incident of how when we placed in the Montfort Library, we placed some books, and one person read it. He borrowed the book and he started reading it. Or he saw it and we put it out in the press also that the books are there. So somehow he got this idea of, he invited us, he called us. So myself and Raghunath went to his house and just up the road, and I started preaching on the Bhagavatam, like anything, all the different volumes, the cantos. I opened the box and preaching. And the man was like so inspired. He put his hand into the books and he was just crying. This is the power of the Bhagavatam. And he was crying, but then I was just about to sign the agreement for him to buy the book. The whole set, his wife came running down. She said, no, we have all these things. And when you meet Raghunath, you ask him about this, because Raghunath met that person maybe a year or two ago. This was like quite some years back. And the lady came and she was like upset with us, trying to sell these books. And she said, you all are types of people, you don't eat from other people, and you're very funny people. We do our prayers, you won't take anything. So I said, who told you that? And then she said, then I told her, you can bring something and you can offer it to us. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to offer it to Krishna. No, you bring it and come. Now you're not going to believe it. She had nothing to offer. Absolutely zero. I went into her kitchen. I said, no, you must find something, because you said, you must find something now. I insisted. And she found one date. That was the best date she had. She found this one date. And then I cut it. I offered it to Krishna and I gave it to everybody. But we didn't sell the books, but it was an experience, that, yes, it gave us an experience of how difficult it is. But that man, he really appreciated us. But I just chopped that lady in front of him and he said nothing. I was like got into her. Now I just leave her. Yeah. And I told you, see, Krishna taught you a lesson. You got nothing to give us. So yeah, so this Bhagavatam is very powerful. So you put in library, school, but there's a whole process how you put it in. But my advice is not to worry too much about that in putting in libraries, because they destroy it after a period, even if you didn't know. It's like if people are not borrowing it, they just get rid of it. So one teacher paid Prabhupada's fare from Butler, Pennsylvania to the main bus terminal in Philadelphia. Prabhupada went from there to New York, where he rented a small room. At that time, he had an idea to get a small temple. So he wrote to a rich man in Bombay asking for money. The man agreed, but the government disallowed it, although Prabhupada got special permission to collect funds from resident Indians. So then, it's always, collecting funds, was always a challenge. But still then Prabhupada wrote to one of his god brothers for help. Sri Raghunath ki. So when he wrote to his god brother Tirtha Maharaj for help for men and asking for men and mridanga, but he also refused to help. So Prabhupada had already asked him for funds for going to the West and publishing the books, but Tirtha Maharaj refused. So, but it was a little like a slight of kind of like a little offensive, because he was hinting that Prabhupada should go with him as his representative. It's a little not good. So in that way he could get the credit if the mission was successful. So that's very dangerous also. Ourselves, we shouldn't do that. Like I was telling Parirapavan, I don't invite them to come with me. I don't do that, right? But if they invite me to come, I go with them, but I don't invite them to come with me, because otherwise we kind of like want to be supported to look good. But they are capable of doing everything themselves. So they can go, and because we need so many men to do these things, so it's important to note that. Yeah, so he wanted to get the credit. And Prabhupada is saying, I understood his mind and carefully avoided him after that. Sorry, yes, what is it? You give him the microphone. Yeah.
In the beginning you mentioned Surabhi Prabhu, the architect for the different projects. And once there was an article in Juhu where almost a similar situation where he mostly got the credit and he didn't, Prabhupada was not prominent in his article. So I don't know if you remember the incident, if you can say something about that.
Yeah, well, I don't recall it so much, but I recall partially, but I don't want to speculate on it. Yeah, but that's also true. What you were saying, they say that he didn't.
Yeah, tying up to this last point that you made, that we must always, at the forefront, always place your spiritual master before you accept any credit on whatever you do.
Yeah.
So it's similar to the last point you made.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, yeah. All credit goes to the spiritual master. You know, we should give credit to, you know, it's all possible by His grace. You see, if you do that, then you'll be protected. Otherwise, you'll become proud and you'll become in the forefront of things. And unfortunately, that's been the case. You know, with many people.
Subsequent to that article that appeared in the newspaper, Srila Prabhupada was actually upset because he was not recognized in that article. It was like almost all the credit went to Surabhi.
Yeah.
Prabhu. So Prabhupada did show up.
Yeah. See, the duty of the disciple is to bring people to their guru. That's the duty of the disciple. It's meant to bring and the credit goes to the guru. But it so happened that when the guru is glorified, then the disciples are also glorified. It's automatic. You know, they'll say, oh, so and so is so and so's disciple. So the idea is to like glorify the guru, because the guru is a transparent via medium. So whatever credit he gets, he just passes it backwards up to Krishna. So he's a transparent medium. But if you get glorified, you may want to keep it for yourself. So yeah, like that. But then, did you say something else?
I was thinking of the Sri Shikshastakam. One of the concluding verses is the last sort of hurdle is if you know, any fame or adoration towards you, it's a subtle hurdle. You might not be aware, but if you sort of take that credit, it can hold your further spiritual advancement, because you wanting the credit for yourself. I think it's 7th or 8th verse of Sri Shakstakam.
Yeah, if you want followers, if you want name, fame, followers, Nadanam, na Janam, na Sundarim, na Kavitam. The 4th verse, those are all impediments for one's spiritual life. And don't try to use other people to promote yourself. That's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. Because our movement need more and more preachers, and when devotees are competent to preach on their own, they should also, go out and get more people and bring more people and preach. So we don't have many, so we should work at that. So then, Prabhupada was saying, while on board on the ship, the captain's wife, who was a palmist, said Prabhupada will live for 100 years. And Prabhupada, he smiled and he was happy, because but he said something interesting. So somehow or the other, the heart attacks were not fatal. So now let us see, because the prediction was that he'll live for 100 years. Then there's and Madhudvishya Swami, is talking about a person from Fiji. His name is Mr. Punja. And Madhudvishya Swami is saying that Prabhupada cannot travel because he's getting old. But then Mr. Punja, he heard about the prediction and he said, "Oh, don't worry, Prabhupada will live to 100. So Madhudvishya Swami asked him, how do you know that Prabhupada will live to 100? He said, no, he took Prabhupada details, his birth details, his signature, his voice, and he went to a fortune teller in Fiji. And the fortune teller predicted he would live to 100 years. This is nice, but then, because if you look at it, because he said, his life was shortened by probably almost about 20 years, or because of the travel. So it was destined to live for that long. And Prabhupada grinned a little bit, yeah. Then we move on to, I'm just going to paraphrase quickly these pages. So Prabhupada also talked about the position of women in our society. And in the Vedic culture, women were not seen in public. I remember, even Pundarik's mother, she just lived in a house and she was not seen in public places. She would very rarely maybe go to the doctor or something. And she always wore a sari. Always. So they remain in secluded places. And Prabhupada was talking about how they would travel in closed carriages, ladies. And he also spoke about how the Krishna's wives play tennis, like on the rooftops of the. It's there in the Bhagavatam, and also Advaita Acharya's wife. You know what's her name? Sita Devi. She traveled in a veiled chair. I don't know how she travels with this Rupanuga, but Sita Devi traveled in a veiled chair. And Prabhupada was speaking about his own mother and wife. They also did the same. And it's quite a heavy statement. He said only prostitutes would be seen publicly. Because in Indian homes, if you go even like in the North Coast, you go to homes, you'll see the homes, they were like an extended family, but the woman wouldn't stay in the back. They would not come in the front. They would not see men. Gopal Raju, this is the way it was. This is how it is. Like in time, yeah. So, and then he spoke. He gave very interesting understanding of the culture. And a woman's status could be understood simply by her dress, how she dressed. Because a married woman kept her head covered, an unmarried woman under the father's care would have the head uncovered. Like a widow will wear a white sari. You could make out that that she's a widow. And generally, society girls are prostitute. They had the hair on the side. Like they have a parting. When I see some devotees, they had that, but I was so, I knew this, but I was just so uncomfortable for me to tell them that. They have it here. It's uncomfortable to say it, but yeah, I saw quite a few of them. They, and the ladies would wear a white sari with no border also. It mustn't have a border, so it's very specific. And their prostitute parted their hairs in a particular way. So the Vedic society was arranged so nicely. And we can understand the status of women, and then they were respectful to them. There's many, we talk, and sometimes we think of India, it's being modernized and things. But let me tell you, when you really speak to people, even in the cities, the boys haven't touched the women. They'll ask them, how are you going to get married? No, when my mother finds somebody, then I'm going to get married. And they do. They do it like that. There's a lot. Even in Bombay, I've met so many. Surat, Bombay, different places. When you're chatting about the culture. Huh? Yeah. So it's like that. So they were intrigued. There's devotees, Hari Sori Prabhu, they were intrigued on the subject matter. But if you come from an Indian background, these things, practically we know about these things. Even myself, I knew about these things because I grew up in a cultured kind of home. Would follow, principles, respect, and I don't recall touching a woman like that even in young age, even if as a teenager. So very, very, So then we move on to the in January 1976, and I'll go through it a little faster. So we're discussing more plans of the temples and how the temple should be built. Now he's talking about the Vedic planetarium. And Prabhupada gave descriptions of how it should be, but it may not just be like that. I don't know how it's going to be now, but he gives a very good description. At the very top will be dazzling display of Krishna's own transcendental planet, Goloka Vrindavan. You see, they're like that. Radha and Krishna is whenever we should recite the Tulsi, the English translation, and I should always look at that, going to Goloka Vrindavan. And then they were talking about the Transcendental Sankirtan Party, the Radha Damodar Transcendental Sankirtan Party, like how people joined. They were musicians, they would just come, they would surrender, they would sell their equipment, and then they will just join. Like selling a mridanga, which you won't want to do anyway, but they would just sell it. They would sell and they would join. And then sometimes their groups, the band groups will break up because one fellow has left or the other fellow has left, like that. Because they were breaking up. So then, after greeting the deities and Guru Puja, Prabhupada didn't speak, he just left he retired to his room. So in the morning, Jayapataka Maharaj, brought a life member, and this is where the life member had come, and Prabhupada was asking him, what he does, and the man said he manufactures, glass. So Prabhupada, dug into him, what is the glass made of? So he said it was silicon, and Swamiji said from sand. And Prabhupada asked him, and who owns the sand? And then, the man knew that it's owned by God. He said, it's owned by Krishna. So Prabhupada said, oh, so you're stealing from God? You're stealing from God? The man laughed, slightly embarrassed. But obviously, being Indian, he appreciated, Prabhupada, sadhu. But then he thought for a minute and said, well, he had to offset what Prabhupada said a little, that implied criticism. So he said, well, I also give some charity. And then Prabhupada said, oh, then you are a little thief. You're giving some charity. So everyone laughed, and the man was happy to be further enlightened to his real position as subordinate to God. And Srila Prabhupada was pointing out that nobody can just take ingredients supplied by God and transform into another form and then have claim of proprietorship. And this is interesting what he said. Srila Prabhupada explained that real honesty is to use everything in the service of Krishna. How's that definition of honesty? Is to use everything in the service of Krishna. That's honesty. Quite an amazing statement. Then there was like some managerial discussions, and there was some change of we always have. We have to change our managers. So Madhudvi Swami, Prabhupada signed a letter sending him as a temple president, sending him to New York as an ad hoc temple president, because there were some challenges, and then Rupanuga, who was the current GBC for New York, will then take Madhudvi's position in Australia. So there was some changes were done, and the interesting point of these changes. Srila Prabhupada said you should hold discussion about exchanging your zones, and there should be a formal resolution on this meeting, because they should swap. It's not good, even in your own, even these workers, we should swap them who work in the temple here. We should make them do other things, so they're not attached. So changing zones, he said, will be refreshing, and it will encourage detachment. Two things. And then it'll also discourage the tendency for leaders to think, well, this area is mine, and that happens. You can't deny that happens everywhere. So this is dangerous. Here's a very good instruction about management. That we have to rotate, because so we don't get attached to it. That's possible? Yeah. Anyway, so later in the evening, there was some discussion about the women, Sometimes these brahmacharis and sannyasis, they have different views about women, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was very much strong about that they shouldn't live in temples. And he found himself in the center of such a dispute, because he said there were distractions, and they had to cater for their kids or whatever. They have so many demands. But Prabhupada overcame all his arguments. He said, although sympathetic to Tamal's concern, he said that it is neither desirable nor possible to keep women from coming to join us, nor would it be practical to house them separately. His conclusion is that if we simply preach then all difficulties will be resolved naturally in due course of time. So he is very liberal. Because there are a lot of women who are far more intelligent than men. And they can do so much more preaching. They can do, excel in certain areas. So Prabhupada defeated all, and it's, Prabhupada himself being a householder understood all these concepts, how to deal with them. So this is very interesting, I found. Then I'll just skip because there was a lot of, after this there are a lot of reports. Then Prabhupada described how the Vedic planetarium would be, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada suggested there should be an airport, in Mayapur, like that. So then Prabhupada, in the next day, on the 22nd, he was around the Ganga and looking at all the everything that was going on. But then, towards the conclusion, we got less time. But one thing he noticed, that he found that, that several men were standing around a mature wheat crop. And you know what they were doing? They were banging empty tins. In an effort to drive away the birds. What a thing. He noticed that. But Prabhupada was quick. He said, he disagreed with that strategy. He said that every living entity has a right to eat. So what you need to do, the solution is you grow more. Then they will eat enough and there will be enough to go around. This is the Vedic conception. He didn't say, he will look at it the way he thought about it. It's a very interesting way. Then Satsvarup Maharaj gave a report on how his performances are and of his library party and how they're distributing books and how they're doing college preaching especially. Then a discussion came about some business that was being run in a temple in Denver. And, business in general is not good. Because it's diplomatic behavior. You get into fault finding like that if you get into business. Because business means cheating. Isn't it? It's very difficult to be an honest businessman. And, it's there in the Gita also in the 1848. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore you should not give up your work. It's later, it comes up here later, but not give up your work. Then and then business. So, but somehow the other devotee, Jayatita Prabhu, he was giving some arguments why we should have the business, why we should we should do businesses, and then he gave some very valuable reasons, because he didn't want the grihastas to depend on the preachers. So he felt that maybe they can do that. Then, but then Prabhupada gave the guiding principle to that, and the guiding principle is that. So let the grihastas who wish to execute business fully fledgedly in the USA and this way support Gurukul. Business must be done by the grihastas, not by the sannyasis or brahmacharis. Neither the sannyasis or brahmacharis can be expected to support Gurukul. So because we started off with speaking about the Gurukul and the funding it, that should be done by the grihastas because they have children. It's their responsibility. But they will expect the sannyasi to do it or the brahmachari to do it. That's not his responsibility. So if anybody talking about some school and what have you to have your Gurukul, the householders must come forward. Correct, right? It's not the business of the temple president too. So you have to come forward. Yeah. So then there other devotees give reports of their performances, how the temples were functioning, and that's where it concludes. With just a lot of reporting on their performances and how they were doing. And Prabhupada from time to time will give them some direction. So that was those in Mayapur, those few days. So we'll just take some quick questions. Rupanu, do you have any question? He was asking something earlier on, but that thing is that microphone.
At one point in our society, it might still be prevalent in some places, the zonal acharya system, like you spoke about Prabhupada asking them to swap zones. So if Prabhupada instructed them to do that, then the question will be, why was that introduced? Because leaders can develop an attachment and not want to relinquish their position, and then becomes a problem sometimes.
Yeah, we should. Yeah. So what's the question?
If Prabhupada initiated that, why was that system introduced?
Yeah, it'll be a good question to raise with we have a GBC, you could raise those questions to them. But my take is that if people are getting attached to this position, if you leave them in one place, they attach. Even attachment is in everybody, like we get attached to places. Like sometimes you come to the temple room, you're sitting there in that corner. You'll sit in different places. You get attached to places also. Like when you at your home, you get attached to sitting in a particular chair at the table, maybe, and to eat. Isn't it? Attachment is there. So that attachment, is not that people are free from it. I must tell you that I disagree. I strongly feel a lot of people are attached to areas and zones and so many different things. That's my personal opinion. But you have to work at it and to get detached from it. We have to work at it, we have to work at it. You see, when you value other people, then you can do that. But if you think you're the best person in that place, you'll never want to go. Then you'll have autocratic style of management, you have different style of management. Within this, I'm just not talking about ISKCON, I'm just talking in general about with other institutions also. When people get attached, they just want to be the pastor in that church because maybe lots of money is coming or something is happening that they're benefiting. But it takes a lot. That's why you have to practice it. You have to live it. You have to live it. And that practice, that practice, like, how are you going to do it? It's by, how do you conquer the mind? Because it's a mental thing. It's in the mind. And then Krishna says, by suitable practice and detachment. Then you must pray that, I get detached from this type of thought process, that I own this place. Because the longer you stay in one area, you think you're the owner. But it belongs to Prabhupada, to ISKCON. Therefore you should travel also. That's why brahmachari, sannyasis are meant to travel. There's a lot to learn from this, as Prabhupada is speaking from. It makes sense. Anybody else want to comment on anything? Gopal Raj, would you like to say something? We've got a few minutes. 1 or 2 minutes. I always stop on time, I think. Yeah.
Talking about attachment. I'm just giving an example at my workplace. Just an example. Makes a difference. Because if you change, I take some men out from a certain position, and I feel that they're so attached that you find they become lazy in that position. But just by moving them and putting them into someone else's position and bring the other guy, you find that there's more production.
Ah.
There's more production, and we find that, wow, it's not only me. I know I learned this from some Muslims, businessmen. They don't put the persons in the same position. You find by attachment, you find that you find there's something going on in there.
Correct.
Some nonsense is going on there. Someone is pulling a job or something because you're so used to the other guys, but you just move them. I'm not saying this is happening in ISKCON, but I don't know. But it's good to move from one place to the other,
No, it's good. That is very true.
Yeah.
Like when you were doing the building,
production.
you was helping us, and we had to utilize one person who just cleaned the temple room. I made him clean the temple room, clean the bathroom, and then help there. Yes, help you. So we had to move them around, so to get more production and more effective, be more effective. Yeah, very good. So we have to go to Port Shepstone now. So we have to leave immediately, right? So thank you very much. And we really truly appreciate. This is good discussion on Prabhupada. We can speak for hours on him, on the way he dealt with things and how he interacted, and especially talking about the culture, how a woman should behave and how the men behave, and it's really very interesting. Yeah. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki